Matt, you have the dubious honor of being one of my close friends and frequent board game collaborator. And indeed, on the weekend we played about, was it 7 hours of this War of Mine?
Yeah, it was a very long time. And we only took one break, really.
Yeah, which was quite impressive to be honest. But I think it's a good board game. I think toward the end of it, we were definitely feeling the 7 hours.
Yeah, I would
Um,
I would think we were too, but I also think a lot of that the game can't really be blamed for in its current state. Actually, the more I think about it.
yeah, I mean, it certainly felt like we were under siege for quite some time. But it's not that the game is clunky or anything. I think so. Basically, to explain kind of a bit more for those who are maybe tuning into this video and haven't read the text article it's going to be embedded in, basically, this War of Mine seeks to simulate the video game in that you have a house with people in it who are trying to survive this siege, and you do that by building upgrades to your house. So you can build heaters and stoves and
Chairs.
chairs, very important, and beds. So you really do start out with pretty much nothing actually at the start of this game, and then in the day phase you kind of you do up the house as best you can with the resources you have, and at night time you go out and scavenge for more of those. I think is there anything I'm missing?
No, that's pretty much it. And the main kind of thing you have to manage are the health levels of your sort of little family, your funny little family, which are measured in sort of emotion. There's like a misery level, a hunger level, and an illness level, and a wounded level. That's it, isn't it? You're sort of keeping
Yes.
those things in balance the whole time, and they
Yeah.
generally increase every day unless you do something to mitigate that. That's
Hmm.
sort of that's what you're spending all your sort of gathered food and the chairs on, making people happy. chairs
Yeah.
chairs make people really happy if you've got a good book.
I mean, it was kind of an interesting thing. I think early on we maybe struggled a little bit to balance out how everyone was doing, and people were quite quickly getting dangerously tired, like halfway dead tired, because we were having to get them to do so much. And it wasn't until we built a few upgrades, like building a stove so we could increase the amount of food we had available and stuff like that, that we really got motoring.
Yeah,
It was
well,
kind of interesting.
actually, it's funny what you just said about the length of the time we played, because I do agree that it's actually quite a pacey game. Like once we were a
Mm,
couple of days into it, we were clipping through the turns and sequence of events like really fast.
mm,
It just lasted for many days, but the more I think about that, the more I wonder if maybe we are actually on what's quite an unusual playthrough of it. Just because the more I think back to it, the more I think we actually got dealt quite a lucky hand like
I think so
like from
too.
the beginning. Certainly, I was thinking about that stove. The stove is an idea, right? It's not part of the initial starter set of cards. Like, my God, if we didn't have that stove
Mm,
and that fifth person from the first day, we would have been in trouble, and it would have been a very short game. So I think, in fact, I was wondering how much the sort of slog of it, not that it was grueling to play, but the sort of the length of time, how
yeah.
much that is part of like the emotional setting the game is trying to give you, because the tension increases the longer we go, right?
Mm,
Because things start getting worse and worse, and you just have greater probability of encountering something horrible like a gang attack or rats eating all the food, that kind of stuff. And I was thinking most games probably don't last all that long. They're probably about an hour and then you die.
yeah.
So
I
I
think
think maybe the
maybe.
length of it is part of that.
Maybe we did just get lucky then. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me to be perfectly honest. Because yeah, I mean we didn't even nobody got sick until pretty much the last round we played,
Yes,
and
when
I
we
think
took that
that's
sick man in and he made everyone sick in the final turn.
he had a shotgun though, so it was worth it.
Yeah,
But I think yeah, we probably got very lucky there. We very quickly got rolling on the food thing, especially after we mugged an old lady for her
repeatedly.
food. Um, and then we just kept cooking more and more stuff. I think we did get lucky, but there were a couple of moments where it really took our legs out from under us. Like we got hit by a plague of rats one night, and they ate all of our non-perishable food. Sorry, all of our perishable food, everything but canned food. And I looked at the events deck, which is how many basically cycles, day and night cycles, you have to go through before you have a chance to end the game and win. I just thought we're not going to make this. There's no way we can do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it felt really unfair at that moment. Actually, I would say that was the high point of my sort of emotional response to the game. Actually, just because we'd sort of figured it out by that point. Like we were
mm,
being quite cocky, and we'd put our sort of internal household economy was largely built around us scavenging enough raw food to turn it into more raw food with the stove and keep
Yeah,
everyone just about well fed enough. So
yeah,
when there was nothing we could do about a bunch of rats coming and eating our entire plan as much as they were eating our food, like I was pissed off actually. It made me angry,
yeah.
which was really good. I mean, that's a nice the fact that it was so unforgiving and disrespectful to us. You know, it
Mm.
wasn't like, oh, well done, you guys have come up with a clever economic solution to winning the game. Like, here's a prize. It was like, no, now it's all gone, and that sort of made me quite frustrated, which is a good thing in the context of the game, I think.
I think so, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you had such a strong kind of negative emotional response to something that is built into the game, because there's another game that is kind of vaguely similar to this War of Mine in that it's trying to teach you about a horrible reality that some people have had to go through. For example, this War of Mine is based loosely on the siege of Sarajevo. The other game is Kolechka, or Q, which we've both played
Yeah.
together, which seeks to simulate what it's like to live in 1980s communist Poland. Um, so you've got all your meeples and you place them in queues to try and get the items on your shopping list. And, doing a successful shop is how you win. But because it's communist Poland and supply lines are really screwed up, you never know how much of what is coming into what stores, right? So, it all sounds kind of bleak, but then every round you have a certain number of action cards that will help you improve your standing in the queue. And this is where I think the educational aspect of Kolechka falls down, is because the jokes are just too good.
Yeah.
I've borrowed someone else's baby, so I get to the front of the queue, or I've got a list that means I can pick up the entire queue and turn it round. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
Screwing up
it's got an element of satire to it.
Yeah,
But I think one of the things that really differentiates it from this, which is worth pointing out, is that it's competitive, whereas this is a
a
co-op game.
cooperative. Yes, that's very
The,
true.
the sort of the competitive edge in Kolechka makes it. I mean, it is really entertaining, obviously, to undermine your friend's attempts to buy electronic goods in the middle of the night after camping. You know, it's really fun, and I guess this game probably won't engender that like so much because it's got a bit more of the the sort of bunker spirit with the people you're playing it with.
Yeah, I think no, I think you're right. It's got because you're all in it together. I think it can hit you collectively harder, and so it manages to maintain the kind of more serious tone that's carried over from the video game. And it's a strange thing. It manages to be fun, but also bleak and punishing at the same time, which is quite a thin line to tread, I think.
Yeah, but it definitely was fun. I mean, and certainly there are quite a lot of emotional rewards when I mean it's got a very simple chance system. Basically, you're just rolling 1d10 for pretty much any potential outcome that could happen in the game. But
Yeah.
there's enough variety in the options that we'd often be awaiting the result, with crossed fingers, hoping for something really good, and would go yeah when it went well, and oh no when it went wrong, which is a
Yeah.
sign that you're having a good time, even though it's kind of rubbish. But again, we got lucky with one of those things. I mean, and the only thing, this isn't sort of that relevant, but the only thing about sort of the mechanics of the game that I didn't like too much was that thing where you got to visit the supermarket over and over again. Which,
Yeah.
just to explain how that works, is you have an option for 3 different locations, one of which you can visit on a given scavenging run, and they're sort of randomized at the beginning. And the idea is that once you've visited one, you roll a dice, and depending on the result, it'll probably disappear. Now, the supermarket seemed like a really good location for us because you have a really high probability of getting something,
Yeah.
including food and like electronic parts and things you need to survive, like across quite a wide spectrum. And we just couldn't get rid of it, so we would
Yeah.
waltz over there every single evening, fill our boots with loads of stuff, have minor dangerous encounters, and then go back home, and the supermarket still be there the next day. So we were
Yeah.
kind of raking it in a little bit, and that did make me think, it was a bit too easy for us there.
Yeah, I think we got quite an easy ride, especially since the other 2 locations we had offered to us were like Sniper Junction and a military outpost. So the
Yeah.
likelihood that we were going to get shot to pieces if we went there meant that there was no reasonable way we could be expected to go anywhere but the supermarket.
Yeah, it would have been lovely to be forced earlier to have to go into a sniper nest,
Yeah.
pick up
Well, I
stuff
think-
off the ground.
I think basically because we were playing the prototype edition and it's missing one of the core aspects of the game, which is going to be the book of scripts, which is going to introduce kind of like strange and different encounters, and all we had were odd kind of samples of what those might be like. I'm hoping that they'll be able to inject enough of a kind of random element into the game in order to well, hopefully there'll be other ways to get rid of locations, in short.
Yeah.
I would say the thing that rankled me, probably because I was the one sat with the box having to dole out the tokens,
Oh yeah.
was that one of the best things about this game, and also by the same token the worst things about this game, is just how many different assets there are. There are different tokens for, from cigarettes all the way up to broken guitars, and you've got all the little pieces to denote when people are miserable or hungry or sick, and it's great. It's really like the attention to detail is amazing, but it makes it very difficult and sometimes quite monotonous to dig things out. It is, yeah. To keep everything kind of in order takes quite a lot of time, and I think basically it's what happens when you take a system, an inventory system that is normally handled by a computer running numbers and keeping track of it for you, and turn it into an analog thing that you then have to do yourself. It's like not changing any of the questions on, say, an advanced maths paper in school or university, and then handing someone an abacus and going, have fun.
Yeah.
Or just beans.
It's slightly hoist by its own petard, isn't it? Because one of the nice things about it is how dynamic the numbers are in it, in that it completely discourages hoarding. We didn't have a chance to hold on to stuff for very long. Our guys would fluctuate in their sort of misery levels like constantly, which is great. So there's never a status quo, which is super. But that means your hand was constantly going back and forth between the box and the table. I don't really know what's to be done about that, aside from the sort of heathen suggestion that an app would be really nice.
Well, there is going to be an app, but I think the app is going to be more for the book of scripts rather than managing your inventory. But yeah, I kind of agree. In this instance, it would certainly streamline things,
And but on the subject of the missing sort of book that we didn't have, I mean that really I think is going to be the key, because what I realised, just again thinking back over the game, was most of the fun we had, I reckon, was from the stories that emerged out of the game. Like the characters that, because they have these little backgrounds, they're drawn in a certain way, they have maybe sort of a hindrance or an edge, something that makes them unique as little cards, which is nice. But the stories that popped into our little world because of the events that were happening were really cool. Yeah. And we built up a really sort of strange dysfunctional family where, we would chat through what they were getting up to and the reasons for certain things happening. And most of the time we were slightly taking the piss. We were being a bit silly with it.
Maybe, yeah.
But it meant that by the end of the game, when that guy Marin left because he didn't get his cup of coffee, there's this one guy who's addicted to coffee, and we'd managed to sort of keep him going throughout the whole game, and he'd become a really useful guy, and he'd become like the cook of the house and was making food for everyone every day.
Guardian and
and then he had this sort of mental breakdown because some kids came up to the house and he ended up murdering a child, and then the next day couldn't get a cup of coffee and just kind of left. And it was really
too much.
Yeah, he got too miserable, and it was a really nice emotional moment that grew organically out of what the game was throwing at us. So I think, but in that sort of sense, it's slightly player dependent because we're both nerds and are prone to telling stories like that, and sort of adding a bit of content to the game in that way. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how good the book is at helping players who are maybe less interested in that sort of get to that stage, sort of telling really interesting stories so you actually care.
I know what you mean. You really do end up kind of role-playing the characters in a way that's not actually dissimilar to the video game, because I think you get into a rhythm with the game, in managing people's fatigue levels and making sure that the same jobs, like heating the house, are done every single day. You end up using people for the same roles, which then makes you think of them as that person. It kind of informs their personality.
Yeah.
If there's the person who is cooking all day and then has to guard at night, so he needs what sleep he can snatch in the morning. Or we had the other character who was always getting stabbed, but also had a compulsion whereby if we had a book in storage, he would stay up all night and read it, so his fatigue level would increase, but his misery would go down.
So we made him burn the books. That was our response. We were so aggravated by his terrible habit of staying up all night reading. We forced him to burn books, even though there's perfectly good wood available. he would have to throw the books in the heater and sit and weep, and that was us getting our own back on a pretend character.
Yeah, that was one of the weirder threads that kind of emerged in our own little narrative. But we, he was a troublemaker. He was the difficult guy who then eventually got killed by a shell falling through the roof of the house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think there's there's a weird purity to the role playing in this War of Mine, and there's a surprising amount of role playing given how heavy the game is on mechanics. Because the journal guides you through everything,
Yeah.
and because it's so comprehensive, I couldn't ever foresee a playthrough where we didn't have to keep referring back to that journal.
Yeah.
It's just so complicated, and yet there's a surprising amount of heart to it, and it guides you through gently, and there's room for you to feel and think and bicker and mug old women and burn books.
Yeah, and I mean, and it does have that save system, which we didn't use,
Yeah.
which is a nice thing, because I guess we were sort of rattling through it because we wanted to get to an end point by the end of the day. But there's that kind of nice thing of being able to take your time with it, spend some time making the decisions. And I think the decisions thing is really interesting because, again, this is something that clearly is going to be a bigger part of it once the script is written. But it's a board game with a moral choice system, which is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
And generally I like playing them, but I'm generally aware that most moral choice systems in video games are broken, right? Because they tend to force you sort of down one path or another path, or they have no real weight. All those things that we've talked about. And generally, I'm one of those people. I don't know about you, Johnny, but I'm one of those people who I'm always the good guy on my first playthrough of a video game. I will take the good choices because I assume I'll get to have more conversations and people will shower me with praise and blah blah blah. I just always assume that's a better move to make.
Yeah.
In this game, and I think it's partly because of the setting and partly because it's a board game itself, and I think this is a positive thing. I was much more capable of making the bad choice.
Yeah.
Because when we had that situation first off where we encountered the old woman in her home, and so this old woman tasked us with helping her find her grandkids, which we could either kind of engage in or kind of ignore her, or notice that she had some raw meat lying around and steal it from her. And we chose the latter because Marco, the fireman, who was there visiting with her, was on his highest hunger level, and if he went through another evening without eating any food, he'd die.
Yeah.
So whereas when I play a video game, I assume the game will have created something. So if I'm really altruistic and nice, I will be saved in the final moments, right? It's always going to have something where I can't really lose if I'm super nice to everyone all the time. Whereas in this game, I was like, well, Marco's dead. He's going to die if we don't get the food. So we had to say to the old woman, sure, we'll find your kids, while we were stealing her raw food, which was awesome. And then it became a weird habit where we kept going back and getting more food because, we'd sort of broken the seal. And that for me was really, really good for role-playing, creating a bit of a character because, it was much, much more difficult to just be the nice guy, which is sort of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And, hopefully we'll be able to come back to the board game and see how it pans out when it's got the full book of scripts and everything. And, we'll maybe even revisit this and see if we do mug as many pensioners as we did in the prototype playthrough. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Matt, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
And if you would like to see more from Eurogamer on... Well, I was going to say board games. We've not done much board game coverage up until now, but hopefully more in the future. But we do have many other videos, so